Okay. All right. I think we should start now. So what I'd like to do to start our meeting today is, first of all, we have 135 participants, and we will have more people joining as we start for the day. One of the important things to know is that we have over 400 members and have had for the last 4 years that I've been president. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for being such great members and coming to each one of our events as you are available. And we've had some fantastic events over 4 years. And I've had a great time being the president of the Women's Club over 4 years. And that being said, I'd like to announce that this is the last time you'll see me as the president announcing our events, because our bylaws say that after 4 years, the president must step down, and I am stepping down this year as your president. I will be staying on the board in another position. As of March 10th, at our next event, the new board of directors for the Women's Club will be announced, so don't miss that event, which will be the Shelley Strickler, the Naughty Boys of Politics presentation. It should be really terrific. But prior to that talk, we will have your new co-presidents, Lori Patterson and Sherry Barish, present her and her presentation, but they will also present the new board of directors. So be sure to not miss the new board of directors on March 10th. I will make sure that there has been an e-flash sent out prior to that, so you are aware of the new change in the board of directors. But for me, it's been a great ride. I've had a super time. I've loved seeing and meeting every single one of you. And I hope you support your two new co-presidents as well as you supported me, because I've just had a terrific time. It's just been wonderful. And I intend to see each and every one of you every other time as well. So that being said, let's talk about the new year coming up and all of the wonderful things we have going on. You know what today's presentation will be. Again, as I mentioned, March 10th will be the announcement of the new board of directors and Shelley Strickler, the Naughty Boys of Politics, from way back when, Alexander Hamilton through today, even Joel Wiener. So today's program is going to be, do you need a penis to be funny? And we're going to end with wieners. I think it's a regular theme here, okay? Then we are going to have on March 21st on our Cafe and Conversation, Arlene Borenstein, the process of making news stories. I think it's very interesting. What does it take to write an entire article for the newspaper? Another Cafe and Conversation will be the Sipperstein Dermatology Group, and that will be on how do we take care of our skin, what happens with aging, what can we do to make sure that we look as good as we possibly can. April 14th, we also have another person that has been with us before that we've enjoyed as well, Dr. Marjorie Marcus. That will be the Royal Feud. What's going on between William and Henry? May 12th brings us another columnist, Frank Sarabino, and his topic is Florida is Florida. Kind of interesting. We'll see what he has to say. Going on into the fall, we're hoping for live presentations, because if they're not, I cannot have those presentations, or actually not I, but the Women's Club. So I'm not going to announce them all, but you should know that we have October and November presentations live, we're hoping. And we also have presentations January and February already booked, and we are working on them all being live. So we have a lot to look forward to in the Women's Club, hoping to see all of you live soon. Most of us have gotten our first, if not second vaccine, which means that within a few weeks, maybe we'll be playing cards in Mahjong, throwing those tiles. Would be super. So let's go on to our today's presentation. We have had Joyce Saltman come and see us twice before. This is her third visit with us. Each time we have been so excited to see her. So those of you that have not seen Joyce before, Joyce is world famous, both in Connecticut and Florida, which is a far wider sphere than she ever expected. To her credit, her finest achievements include 2 brilliant children, Stephen, a cardiologist, and Beth, a New York attorney. But even more so, she has 2 brilliant grandchildren, Sophia and Leo. not to mention her amazing grand dog, Daisy, who happens to be a King Charles Spaniel. She has had a fabulous career as a professor, now emeritus, of the special education at Southern Connecticut State University. She has earned several prize awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award at AATH, Outstanding Faculty Award from the Academy for Continuing Education in Florida, and the Athena Award for Outstanding Leadership for Women for the state of Connecticut. And she has the most loving and devoted friends that anyone has ever known. But she also has the most loving and devoted fans at Valencia Shore that anybody could ever talk about. So with that being said, I would like to introduce one of the best speakers that we have ever had and that we hope to continue having, and that has made us laugh, cry, and just, we love to death, Joyce Saltman.
Oh, Kathy, that
Please
is,
spotlight her. Thank you.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my only regret is that my mother is not alive to have heard that amazing introduction, really. And by the way, some of my really wonderful friends happen to live in Valencia Shores, so I am delighted all around. And there's nothing, there is nothing better than going back to places that I've already been, because at that point you become friends with people. And I love coming into all the social halls and getting hugs. So I am really hug deprived right now, and I'm looking forward to everybody being vaccinated. So even with a mask on, we can kind of hug each other. Ironically, I went in to get a drink when you suggested that people have their tea or coffee with them. So I went to get a drink of water, and I decided to take out this mug, which is a favorite mug of mine, that says, "Chocolate is cheaper than therapy and you don't need an appointment." And I think that is very gender oriented, because men do not understand. You know, one of my lectures is called the Chocolate for Breakfast Diet. And according to the research, there is no substitute for chocolate for women. When a woman is craving chocolate, it doesn't matter what she has instead of it, she still goes on until she reaches that chocolate high. But men don't have that. They're so inferior in so many ways. And I apologize to those of you who are visiting with the Women's Club and happen to be men, but I'm going to give you many reasons why we have the differences that we have. So this talk, and I know you announced it correctly, I had named this talk, "Do You Need a Penis to Be Funny?" And my first response, the first time I was going to be doing this talk, was for Brandeis Study Group. And I got this email from Brandeis Study Group that said, "I can't put that in the study guide. Maybe just a look at gender differences in humor. Thanks." All right. So that's Brandeis Study Group, which are people our age. They could not put the word penis into a study guide. However, I sent in that same thing. I speak once a month at Sinai Residence down in Boca, and they've always been live. But the next one, I'm going there to their studio, and they're going to be, sending it out to everyone. The last one was live, and unfortunately, because people are so far away, all wearing masks, and the speaker also had to be wearing a mask, people complained that they couldn't hear loudly enough. So this one's going to be, sent to their apartments. Anyhow, Julianne Smolansky, was in charge of programming for the whole of Sinai Residence. When I sent her the topic, right, is there going to be any nudity in this show, was the answer I got. She wrote, "LOL, love, perfect." So at Sinai Residence, they know that people know what the word penis is, and they did not find it offensive. So I just want you to know you are very forward-thinking people, because you were willing to handle that word. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a lot of research, because those of you who know me know that why I don't do stand-up comedy is I like to believe that there is some information that you're getting that may either change your understanding of an issue or add to the understanding. And then, of course, you will hear an adequate number of jokes to sustain you for the rest of the day. So let me first give you some of the research issues that I've done. All right. And in the gender issues, first one was competitive versus cooperative humor. All right. And one of the things that we have found in all of the research articles, and there are books written about this, and I have them all in my shelves in the next room here, that humor is a social lubricant. So we would have to say it's going to loosen people up and they're going to feel more connected to each other. However, and this is John Moriel, the author and professor of philosophy, says women humor leads to win-win outcomes. Okay? Humor based on empathy, focusing on what any of us might have done that establishes some kind of equality. We can share our flaws, and it tends to be more positive humor. All right. Men, however, use humor competitively. That his statement was that they use humor to score points and to triumph. They use sarcasm or focus on what somebody else did or fictional jokes, and they're usually about negative things. And I have a friend who did humor and magic for comedy and magic for 25 years professionally. And his name is Peter. He is now, as you can imagine, he now works as a psychotherapist, which is really funny off of, comedy and magic. And I remember when we used to be out doing speaking engagements, we would talk to each other at night and call each other on the phone. And I would say to him, Peter, how'd you do? And he would say, I killed. And that was the best possible assessment that he could have had. And he would say to me, well, Joyce, how did you do? And I would say, great, they loved me. And that really is the bottom line. For me, being out there speaking, particularly helping people laugh, is a way of connecting and feeling loved. And for Peter, it was a way of winning. It was a way of competing and one-upping people. And that does seem to be very characteristic of one of the differences between male and female humor. Here's a second difference is that in style, we have very different styles. Men usually do one-liners, right? And women usually tell stories. And what was really interesting about this, I mean, we know the Henny Youngman, take my wife, please. I mean, these are all very funny one-liners. I was interested to see over the last many years, and this goes back a ways when I'm talking about people like Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby really, and Jerry Seinfeld, really used very female forms of humor. They were storytellers. They got you involved with their family and what their fathers were doing. And, it was very story linked stuff, which, to me, I like because I was a woman even then. The talented director for the Johnny Carson show said, a rule for a TV spot, you must get 5 laughs per minute for a 6-minute routine. So you have to know Joan Rivers got on frequently, right? As opposed to Seinfeld. Don Rickles got on frequently as opposed to Chris Rock, who also is more apt to be telling stories. So that's I thought that was a very interesting aside. And when you listen to the guys in your group who are chatting and making jokes, you will notice that the male jokes are very much shorter. The women, we get into stories about the people that we're joking about. It's quite interesting. A third issue as a gender issue is power. Lower status versus higher status in the what we think of even in the workplace. The secretaries cannot tell jokes about the boss to the boss. The boss, however, can tell jokes about the secretaries to anybody he wants. The person with the higher status is permitted to make jokes in any way possible, and it is a sign of status to be able to make those jokes. The higher the status, the greater the initiation of jokes. Laughter admits vulnerability, which is why some men will not laugh when a woman is in the joke-telling role. They won't give a woman that control. And I like to remember, I used to do a lot of school systems, for in-service trainings, for orientation days. And I remember so clearly, one time I was at a school called Nanawag School in Connecticut, and I was doing a workshop for the teachers, and they were all, seated right in front of me, obviously. We were all in just regular chairs. And there was one man who never smiled. And I tried to make little jokes to him, and I tried to really focus on him. Usually ways to project some positive feelings onto someone, could not get this man to smile not one single time. And some of the female teachers had invited me to have lunch with them. And of course, I went and I said, what is it with this guy who's sitting directly in front of me in the very first row? And the teacher said, we've been really surprised watching him because he is our faculty comedian. He cuts up all during all the staff meetings and everything. He's the funniest person in our meetings, and yet we are noticing that he is not laughing. And that was such, by the way, in the afternoon, when we came back from lunch, I did a lot of interactive stuff, and indeed, he took the main role and everything. There was no problem getting him involved. But it was such a great example of how hard it is for some males to give up power to a female. I see that often when I am speaking to an auditorium full of people, particularly when I give my talk about laughter, prescription for survival. I am always amazed. I will watch the women, and the women are laughing right away. They are happy to laugh with the woman. There's no problem. The men are usually sitting there like this and not moving. And you will see the women move their heads and their shoulder a little bit towards the person sitting on the other side, as though to distance themselves from their husbands who are not laughing. It usually takes me about 10 minutes to get the men warmed up enough so that they are laughing also. But it is a fascinating, I love when I do the research and then I see the results of it, which are just validating of things that I had already seen. All right, a fourth point, of course, is that being funny tended to be unladylike. All right. And one of the statements was that this is aggressive initiator versus a passive appreciator. All right. The one who is the initiator of humor obviously is aggressing into the environment. It's quiet in the environment. Somebody is making a joke. They're really unsettling the climate in that environment. Ellen DeGeneres said on a Jimmy Kimmel interview, a great statement. She said that comedy was always male dominated because being on stage is a very aggressive thing and leaves one vulnerable. And that is the truth. And that is also one of the reasons why a lot of women were a little hesitant to get involved in this, because you are vulnerable. People are going to boo you, or they're going to throw tomatoes at you, which thank God has not happened so far. Lynn Alpern, who was the author of many marvelous books, she said, when she was at Arizona State University, I was speaking for a conference, and she was there, and she was asked that question, and she said, why can't I tell a joke? Because I'm not supposed to. Interesting. Now, thank God, a lot of this has changed. I'm going to give you a couple of the updates. Today, Paul McGee, who wrote one of the really landmark books, he's a PhD psychologist, taught psychology in universities. He wrote Humor, Its Origin and Development. He said that creativity is linked to humor, and who could be possibly more creative than a woman? And you have to look at that. I mean, we're the ones having babies, right? We're the ones decorating rooms. We're the ones dressing our husbands. That's the way that, women show creativity. So what women did by getting more involved in comedy is they broke a humor barrier. Elaine Boosler was a big hit in the 70s. And up until her, there were really no female comedians in the 60s. There were no female comedians. I'm not talking about a couple of the greats from the olden days who kind of masked humor by singing and being funny in that way. But really, you did not see stand-up comedy on television. You didn't see stand-up comedians on television shows anywhere. Now women have abandoned the dumb blonde and airhead routines. They're willing to violate the cultural expectations that females should not aggressively do anything and no longer are afraid to dominate mixed sex social interactions. And what's really terrific about that, as Roz Warren, who wrote a terrific book, which of course I have 2 copies of, she edited The Revolutionary Laughter, The World of Women Comics. She interviewed dozens of well-known comedians and said, if you want to tell people the truth, you'd better do it with a punchline or they'll kill you. Gilda Radner said, humor is truth, only faster. And a good example was Betty White, who said, if men could get pregnant, abortions would be available at Jiffy Lube. Those are some of the very clever statements that have been made by some of the women. And by the way, people have often asked when we talk about, boy, there were not stand-up comics really until Elaine Boozler in this generation. People talk about Carol Burnett, Lucille Ball. Neither of them were comedians. They were both actresses who worked in a comic field, in that the scripts that were written for them and therefore made them funny were not generated in their own comedy routines. They did not do stand-up comedy the way we're talking about it now. All right, well, now I'm going to switch a little bit now that we know the four basic reasons why women have not been predominantly the humor creators. I'm going to tell you about something that all of us in the women's club would be interested in, and that's about humor and relationship satisfaction. All right. There was a study with 3,000 married couples. Now, see, by the way, you know, very often we are reading studies, especially now with COVID. Some of these studies are so erroneous that it's frightening to me. But I read studies in every possible area, and they will tell you in our study. And then I look to see what was the study: 7 people, 11 people. It's a study better than just talking to your two friends. But in the meantime, when you're reading about a study with 3,000 married couples, that has some backing to it. They were from 5 different countries. Both husbands and wives were happier with a humorous partner, though the trait was more important for the marital satisfaction of the wives. Very interesting. The wives were very, very intent on having a humorous partner. And one of the reasons, according to some of the research following that, was that we are much choosier in picking a permanent partner, particularly when it was the time that we were choosing somebody to have children with. And the fact is that, as we know, humor is very closely aligned with intelligence and creativity. So the women who were looking for somebody who was intelligent and creative, who would thus offer that as part of the gene pool for the upcoming generations, were looking for men who were humorous. Now, here's a couple more interesting things about the relationships. In terms of conflict resolution, researchers observed 60 newlywed couples when discussing the problems in their marriages. The researchers found when following up 18 months later, they showed with high stress, the more the husband used humor, the greater the chance of divorce or separation. All right. So, and why would that be? Why would that be? Because you're telling him something that's really bothering you, and he's saying, oh, that's like when you were annoyed about the frosting. They will make a joke about something when you want to be heard about it. And just for record, I am also trained, I'm a special ed professor, but I'm also trained in marriage and family therapy. And it is always fascinating to me when you read about the differences in how men and women really are communicating, and how our different styles have made for so many of the problems that we've been dealing with. Because when a woman presents a problem to her husband, spouse, a significant other, whatever we want to call the other person, the male role, as he sees it, is to solve the problem. Whereas the female's role is to be empathetic, to say, gee, honey, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this. I'll see if we could work through it together. The guy is saying, well, why don't you try this and such? Let's call so-and-so. They are offering problem solution rather than a caring, empathic kind of way. It's interesting. And we see that also in their understanding of humor. By contrast, in a similar study of 130 married couples, a wife's humor predicted greater stability over 6 years, thus showing the disparate function of humor for men and women. For men, it served as a way to distract from dealing with the problems in the relationship, perhaps to reduce his own anxiety. And for the women, they use humor to create a more relaxed atmosphere and calm the husband's heart rate, thus proving beneficial to their marriage. So, I mean, these are all wonderful things that we know about, differences. They did find, however, that they enjoy more and stronger orgasms when women have a sense of humor. They also initiated sex more often, and they had more sex in general, right? that was not found in women with higher humor production. It was found in humor who were greater appreciators. So if we let the guy shine, it's like when your mother told you don't act too smart or let him win the tennis tournament or whatever it is. These are just interesting things that we've learned. Okay, now here's one other study that I think you're going to like. And this was about are men funnier than women? And this was a study done in October of 2019, so it's only 2 years old. The study at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro reviewed 28 studies, including the United States, United Kingdom, Hungary, Germany, and Israel, with 5,057 participants. And their findings were overall, men were rated as funnier than women. 63% of the men scored above the mean humor ability of women, which is considered a small to medium difference. This means that on average, men appear to have higher humor production than women. In mating, humor plays a major role with strong evolutionary basis, and that is what I was talking about, because humor is so strongly correlated with intelligence, and women are looking for an intelligent husband. Okay? Now, Joan Rivers said, comedy is half music. Carol Burnett said, comedy is tragedy plus time. And Roseanne said, comics are angry people, which certainly would account for some of Roseanne Barr's humor, as we know. Okay, now I one of the wonderful books that I read was Gina Barreto, who's a friend of mine and teaches at University of Connecticut, wrote a book which actually was from her doctoral dissertation, and it was called They Used to Call Me Snow White, But I Drifted. And that was published in 2013. And I have 3 autographed copies and I bring them different places and I just love them. And she talks a lot about this. She quoted, for example, Joan Rivers remarked that comedy is still a man's game. You have to be very, very confident and strong. And this was best exemplified by a comment by the Irish comic Mary Bourke, who said her father's attempt to obscure her profession as a stand-up comedian was to tell the neighbors she's a crackhead whore, which apparently was preferable than admitting that you had a daughter who was out there making fun and doing stand-up comedy. In 1991, comedian Cynthia Heimel wrote a book entitled, If You Can't Live Without Me, Why Aren't You Dead Yet? All right, some good advice. Women don't make fools of men. Most of them are do-it-yourself types. Go for a younger man. They never mature anyway. And don't imagine you can change a man unless he's in diapers. So now, as you may notice, we're going to be getting into some of the very funny things that I had collected over my time just looking at gender and humor. Okay, punctuation has all to do with it. A man wrote, woman, comma, without her man, comma, is nothing. And women wrote, woman, exclamation point, without her, man is nothing. It's the same sentence, differently punctuated, right? Okay, here's another one. Research says that men use about 15,000 words each day and women use 30,000. That is because we women have to repeat everything twice. Like a man, you say to him, you're never listening. And he said, what? Right. So true. Bumper stickers for women. One, if you want breakfast in bed, sleep in the kitchen. Another one was, I'm out of estrogen and I have a gun. And the third one was, of course I don't look busy. I did it right the first time. So these are just a couple of those I think you will like. Okay, here are some. In terms of humor and gender, I just want to add one more thing. Saying that she's got a great sense of humor is often a pejorative, like she's got a beautiful face when you're describing a fat girl. That sometimes when people are talking about fixing people up, my husband died 2.5 years ago, and I'm going to mention him because I met him at a talk that I was giving here in Florida. He was renting in Florida, and he attended a workshop, a lecture that was sponsored by the Humanistic Society, the Jewish Humanist Society. And I had mentioned in my talk that my husband had died some years before that, and he said, he came over to me after the talk and he said to me, you mentioned you were single. Are you really single or do you have a main squeeze? I said, no, I'm really single. He said, well, then I'd like to take you out. And I remember getting home and I spoke to a couple of my friends and I said, what a great sign. Because a lot of men who will hear me speak, seeing a woman in a position of power, seeing an obviously assertive, if not sometimes aggressive female, seeing someone who is not ashamed to make statements in front of a mixed group of people, if he is not intimidated by me as a powerful woman, that is a good person for me to date and ultimately to marry. And that is just so true. When you are looking at how social situations turn out, there are many more people that are initiated. And just apropos of that, I joined Match.com. And I remember when I spoke to Beth, I said, I think a lot of people are intimidated when it asks you to check off your education level. I have listed that I have a doctoral degree. And I said to Beth, I said, a lot of people are not answering me, I suspect, because they are feeling intimidated by too much education. Not that that matters outside of an academic setting. And my daughter said, I said, so I'm thinking of taking that out. And my daughter said to me, Ma, why would you want to date a guy who is intimidated by an educated woman? So I had to think about that and I didn't take it out. But all of these are issues and they are so clearly defined when we look at humor and gender differences in humor. So I'm going to give you a couple more. Freud said, women don't need a sense of humor because jokes release hostility and women have fewer strong feelings to repress. If a joke hides sexual or aggressive impulses, then girls will not make many jokes since they do not have either sexual or aggressive impulses. You listening to this? The fact that these are in actual books by brilliant minds in other areas makes them obviously more. Okay, here's a good one. Male humor often shows implicit or explicit contempt for women. Here's an example. How can you tell when a woman has an orgasm? And the man's answer is, who cares? Here's another one. Women's humor relies on a reversal of that contempt and anger, aiming it at men, and it relies on an undercutting of the male's brag. Example, why are women so bad in math? And the answer is because for years, men have been trying to convince them that this was 8 inches. All right, so we're making a little joke about something that the guys do. Florence Kennedy, who's a gay Black activist, is noted for her ability to get to the heart of the matter. Example, when a male Hitler yelled out, "Are you a lesbian?" she immediately replied, "Are you my alternative?" Jenny Jones said, "He asked me to mother him, so I spit on a hanky and washed his face. I was just using him. Right after making love, I run out and weigh myself." Love it. These are great examples of how women are using this not only kiddingly, but in such positive ways. Liz Carpenter was a former White House staff for Lady Bird Johnson. She published a book. And she said, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. said, "I liked your book, Liz. Who wrote it for you?" Liz replied brightly, "I'm glad you liked it, Arthur. Who read it to you?" All right. Now I had, this was a great, Jeff Dunham said, instead of talking about vagina voodoo, is much stronger than what they talk about penis power. And I thought that was pretty clever. Here's another one. A husband looking through the newspaper came upon a story that said women use more words than men, and that was because of what we said, okay? It's because her husband answered, "What?" when she said it's because we have to say everything twice. Soon, son, dad, did you ever know that in other countries you don't know who your wife is until you get married? And the father said, "It's like that everywhere, son." Right? That is a male joke. Right? You're going to very soon see the difference between male humor and female humor. Okay. After 35 years of marriage, a husband and wife went for counseling. When asked what the problem was, the wife went into a tirade listing every problem they had ever had in all the years they'd been married. On and on and on: neglect, lack of intimacy, emptiness, loneliness, feeling unloved and unlovable, an entire laundry list of unmet needs that she endured. Finally, after allowing this for a sufficient length of time, the therapist got up, walked around the desk, and after asking the wife to stand, he embraced and kissed her long and passionately as her husband watched with a raised eyebrow. The woman shut up and quietly sat down in a daze. The therapist turned to the husband and said, "This is what your wife needs at least 3 times a week. Can you do this?" "Well, I can drop her off here on Mondays and Wednesdays, but I fish on Fridays." That's what the guy got out of that little demonstration. Okay, here is one of my absolute favorite jokes. The pastor asked if anyone in the congregation could like to express praise for answered prayers. Phyllis stood and walked to the podium. She said, I have a praise. 2 months ago, my husband Bob had a terrible bicycle wreck and his scrotum was completely crushed. The pain was excruciating and the doctors didn't know if they could actually help him. You could hear a muffled gasp from the men in the congregation as they imagined the pain that poor Bob must have experienced. Bob was unable to hold me or the children, she went on, and every move caused him terrible pain. We prayed as the doctors performed a delicate operation, and it turned out they were able to piece together the crushed remnants of Bob's scrotum and wrap wire around it to hold it in place. Again, the men in the congregation were unnerved and squirmed uncomfortably as they imagined the horrible surgery performed on poor Bob. Now, she announced in a quavering voice, thank the Lord. Bob is out of the hospital, and the doctors say that with time, his scrotum should recover completely. All the men sighed with relief. The pastor rose and tentatively asked if anyone else had something to say. A man stood up and walked slowly to the podium. He said, I'm Bob. The entire congregation held its breath, and he said, I just want to tell my wife that the word is sternum. That's such a great joke. It is just really a great joke. I love that. Okay. This is another nice one. I got this just last year. Just before undergoing surgery for an avid golfer, the surgeon says, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is I have to amputate your arm. The good news is that I have a replacement, but it's from a woman. And of course, he takes the arm. A year later, they meet on the golf course. And the doctor said, how's your new arm? Great, the guy says. I'm playing the best golf of my life. My arm has much finer touch and my putting has really improved. Not only that, my handwriting has gotten better. I can sew my own clothes and I'm even painting landscapes in watercolor. Well, said the doctor, is there any side effects? He said, well, just one problem. Every time I get an erection, I get a headache. These are really gender specific jokes. There's no question about it, okay? A woman cranky because her husband was late coming home again, decided to leave a note saying, I've had enough and have left you. Don't bother coming after me. Then she hid under the bed to see his reaction. After a short while, the husband comes home and she could hear him in the kitchen before he comes into the bedroom. She could see him walk towards the dresser and pick up the note. After a few minutes, he wrote something on it before picking up the phone and calling someone. She's finally gone. Yeah, I know, about time. I'm coming to see you. Put on that French nightie. I love you. Can't wait to see you. We'll do all the naughty things you like. He hung up, grabbed his keys, and left. She heard the car drive off as she came out from under the bed, seething with rage and filled with tears in her eyes. She grabbed the note to see what he wrote. I can see your feet under the bed. We're out of bread. I'll be back in 15 minutes. These are, by the way, there are so many thousands of gender jokes that I have files, honest to God, this thick with jokes. I'm trying to give you ones that were new to me, figuring that some of these will be new to you. Okay, how is this one? A man calls home to his wife and says, honey, I've been invited to fly to Canada with my boss and several of his friends to go fishing for the long weekend. This is a good opportunity for me to get that promotion I've been wanting. So could you please pack enough clothes for a 3-day weekend? And also, would you get out my ride and tackle box from the attic? We're leaving at 4:30 in the morning and I'll swing by the house to pick up my things. Oh, please pack my new navy blue silk pajamas. The wife thinks this sounds a bit odd, but being a good wife, she does exactly what her husband asked. Following the long weekend, he returns home a little tired, looking good. The wife welcomes him home and asks if he caught many fish. He says, yes, lots of walleyes, some bass, and a few pike. But he said, why didn't you pack my new blue silk pajamas like I asked you to? The wife replies, I did. They're in your tackle box. Very clever. Okay. A man walks out to the street and catches a taxi. And this one is very, very good for the guys. Catches a taxi just going by. He gets into the taxi and the cabbie says, perfect timing. You're just like Frank. Passenger, who? Cabbie, Frank Feldman. He's the guy who did everything right all the time. Like my coming along when you needed a cab. Things happened like that to Frank Feldman every single day. Passenger says, there are always a few clouds over everybody. Oh, Cabbie says, not Frank Feldman. He was a terrific athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam at tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone and danced like a Broadway star. And you should have heard him play the piano. He was an amazing guy. Passenger says, sounds like he was really something special. Cabbie, there's more. He had a memory like a computer. He remembered everybody's birthday. He knew all about wine, which foods to order and which fork to eat with them. He could fix anything, not like me. I changed a fuse and the whole street blocks out. But Frank Feldman could do everything right. Passenger, wow, what a guy. Cabbie, he always knew the quickest way to go in traffic and avoid traffic jams. Not like me. I always seem to get stuck in them. But Frank, he never made a mistake and he really knew how to treat a woman and make her feel good. He would never answer her back if she was in a bad mood, and his clothing was always immaculate, shoes highly polished. He was the perfect man. He never made a mistake. No one could ever measure up to Frank Feldman. Passenger, how did you meet him? Cabbie, oh, I never actually met Frank. He died and I married his wife. I hope you are enjoying some of these as much as I enjoyed finding them. Here was a map of the human Y chromosome, and the following traits were found by Sandra Beckwith from Why Can't a Man Be More Like a Woman? These are what is on his Y chromosome. Gadgetry, channel flipping, catching and throwing, self-confidence having nothing to do with ability, ability to remember and tell jokes, read sports pages, addiction to death and destruction movies, playing air guitar, the ability to identify aircraft, pre-adolescent fascination with arachnid and reptiles, spitting, sitting in the John reading, inability to express affection over the phone, selective hearing loss, and a total lack of recall for dates. So some of the things that are on the Y chromosome, and I will tell you, a friend of mine, Brenda Elsager, was writing a book, and she asked people to contribute stories, then she would see if she wanted to use them. I contributed the stories, and I think I named it something like Men Are Idiots. But her little group of people who judged on the things to be included in this book, they did not like the title. So I changed the title to An X Deficiency, because obviously in having an X and a Y, the men are deficient of the second X, which is why we are so much superior in so many other ways. So here are just a couple more. When I was born, I was given a choice, a big pecker or a good memory. I don't remember what I chose. Your birth certificate is an apology letter from the condom factory. A wife is a sex object. Every time you ask for sex, she objects. Impotence, nature's way of saying no hard feelings. There are only two four-letter words that are offensive to men, don't and stop, unless they are used together. Panties, not the best thing on earth, but next to the best thing on earth. I love that one. Virginity can be cured. Virginity is not dignity, it's lack of opportunity. Having sex is like playing bridge. If you don't have a good partner, you better have a good hand. I tried phone sex once, but the holes in the dial were too small. Now, no kid in this generation can possibly understand that joke. That should give you an idea how long ago that one was written. Question, what's an Australian kiss? Answer, the same thing as a French kiss, only down under. A couple just married were happy with the whole thing. He was happy with the whole and she was happy with the thing. Question, what are the three biggest tragedies in a man's life? Answer, life sucks, job sucks, and the wife doesn't. Question, why do men find it difficult to make eye contact? Answer, breasts don't have eyes. And then, despite the old saying, don't take your troubles to bed, many men still sleep with their wives. Now, here's one more on this tack. When God created Adam and Eve, he said, I only have two gifts. One is the art of peeing standing. And then Adam stepped forward and shouted, me. I would love it. Please, Lord, please, please. I will make my life, it will make my life substantially easier. Eve nodded and said those things did not matter to her. Then God gave Adam the gift, and he began to shout for joy. He ran through the Garden of Eden and used it to wet all the trees and bushes, ran down the beach making drawings with his pea in the sand. Well, he would not stop showing off. God and Eve watched the man crazy with happiness, and Eve asked God, what is the other gift? God answered, Eve, a brain, and it is for you. So, old concept, but it's it's a good one. Now, here are just some other examples of how different objects are either male or female. Okay, freezer bags. Freezer bags are male because they hold everything in, but you can see right through them. Photocopiers, these are female because once turned off, it takes a while to warm them up again. They are an effective reproductive device if the right buttons are pushed, but can also wreak havoc if you push the wrong buttons. Tires. Tires are males because they go bald easily and are often overinflated. Hot air balloons, also a male object because we get them to go anywhere, you have to light the fire under their butt. Sponges, of course, are female because they are soft, squeezable, and retain water. Web pages are female because they're constantly being looked at and frequently getting hit on. Trains are definitely male because they always use the same old lines for picking up people. And egg timers are female because over time, all the weight shifts to the bottom. Hammers, of course, are male because in the last 5,000 years, they've hardly changed at all and are occasionally handy to have around. The remote control, and this was a surprise in this collection, the remote control is female, which I'm sure the men could not possibly have imagined. They would think it would be male, but you have to consider this. The remote control, it easily gives a man pleasure. He'd be lost without it, and while he doesn't always know which buttons to push, he just keeps trying, and that is why the remote control is clearly female. All right, I'm going to give you just another. This is a Florida one you'll love, and I just got this one a couple of weeks ago. All right, an old man in his mid-80s struggles to get up from the couch, then starts putting on his coat. His wife, seeing the unexpected behavior, asks, "Where are you going?" He replies, "I'm going to the doctor." "Why, are you sick?" "Nope, I'm going to get me some Viagra." Immediately, the wife starts working and she positions herself to go out and she gets her jacket. And he says, "Where the heck are you going?" She says, "I'm going to the doctor too." He says, "What do you need?" She says, "If you're going to start using that rusty old thing, I'm getting a tetanus shot." I love that one. There's another one, by the way, that's in my talk when I do the humorous look at sex and aging, which is one of my favorites, which I will give to you now, which is about the guy and a gal are living together in Sinai residence, and they go to all the lectures together, and they hold hands, and they have their meals together. And one day he says to her, "How would you like to come up to my apartment after dinner?" And she says, "I would love to." And they go up to the apartment and he pulls the shades and he pulls the curtains and he shuts off all the lights and they get into bed and they had the most wild, passionate love that you could possibly imagine. And at the end, he looks at her lovingly and he says to her, "That is the most fabulous sex I have ever had in my life. I can't remember ever having had anything more passionate than that." He said, "But I wish you had told me that you were a virgin." And she says to him, "Well, honey, if I had known that you could get an erection, I would have taken off my pantyhose." And that is, good gender differences in humor, obviously. I suspect the men would not find that quite as funny as we women do, but it is pretty funny. Okay, here's one more. And this is a gender joke, and it would not be as good if it were the other way around. An older gentleman was on the operating table awaiting surgery, and he insisted that his son, a renowned surgeon, perform the operation. As he was about to get the anesthesia, he asked to speak to his son. "Yes, Dad, what is it?" "Don't be nervous, son. Do your best, and just remember, if anything does not go well, and something happens to me, your mother is going to come and live with you and your wife. That would not have been nearly as good if it was the other way around, because people don't really usually mind having the father living with the family, but more people are objecting, obviously, to the woman. Okay. Okay, and here's one last joke that I just got. Jaime, an older gentleman, goes to his doctor to get some help with a problem he's been having. Doc, my schmeckle is not working so good no more, and I want to continue to enjoy intimate moments intimate with my wife, Sadie. The doctor is impressed with his devotion to his love life and assures Jaime that he doesn't need to worry. Medical science has an answer to his problem. Take this little blue pill on Mondays, skip Tuesdays, take another on Wednesdays, skip Thursdays, and so on. Jaime thanks him profusely and leaves his room. A few months later, the doctor is in the deli and sees Sadie without Jaime. He asks where her husband is. Oh, doctor, I'm so afraid. Jaime passed away last month. The doctor is shocked and surprised. Oh no, I hope it wasn't the Viagra. Oh no, she says, it was the skipping. I hope that some of you have gotten some new jokes. And if you have any questions that you think I'm capable of answering, by all means, I hope you will give them now.
Okay, ladies, if you care to have a question for Joyce, please put it in chat and we will unmute you at this time. We'll give it a few seconds, but Joyce, thank you so much. I found this extremely enjoyable. I'm sure everybody else did, because we were on mute. You did not hear our laughter, but
Yes.
I'm sure there was plenty.
Doing Zooms.
I just love some of the mispronunciations. It reminded me of a Catholic joke with a mispronunciation. Remind me to tell you another time,
Okay.
you know? So I'm waiting for the chats.
Well, if you unmute somebody, they can actually speak. Why
I know,
don't we?
waiting.
No?
I'm waiting for my Zoom people to unmute everyone.
Okay, unmute everybody, and if anybody has a question, they can ask it, and we can also see their picture. Hopefully, we can get back to the, all the little boxes, so I can see who's here.
Well, it's on mute all. Let's see if I can unmute all.
I took care of that, Kathy.
Okay, they're
Okay.
all still on mute.
Can you also get the pictures?
Okay, so Karen asked, do these gender differences hold across generations?
They do. One of the reasons, and by the way, another time I will be happy to give you the research about the actual difference in our brains, which is fascinating.
Somebody has two pieces of equipment on.
One of the fascinating things is really how much more focused the brain, the way our brains are, and the way I've got whole big articles about this, just about how we process information. Male brains utilize nearly 7 times more gray matter for activity, while female brains utilize nearly 10 times more white matter. And what that has to do is the gathering of information, why we are able to multitask and the guys can't, but why they are able to focus totally on one thing when we are distracted by all kinds of other things. It is really fascinating, and a lot of this has to do with brain structure. So in those ways, those gender differences are not going to change.
Okay, next. Judith Klein, thanks Joyce, I'm a fan. How about teasing? Men love this, but no women I know do. Is this about power control or something else?
Well, it's again, when we talked about how the women ends up getting separated or divorced when the men kid around or tease them a lot. Very often the men are using this to distract us from what the real issue is. So they'll make a joke about something that we're saying that we really want to talk about and solve a problem. So it is more, and teasing is very short. When we talked about the one-liners, that guys like quick one-liners and the women like stories, teasing are really forms of one-liners, and we do much less of that than the guys do.
Okay, is anything else?
That was a thank you, Joyce. You look great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Anything else?
No one has any comments? You have a joke you want to add?
So let me tell you one real quick one.
Go ahead.
We're talking about in the temple, but there happened to be one that said, this gentleman went to an old monastery, and he said to the head monk, he said, what are all the monks doing downstairs? And the head monk said, well, you know what? They're all rewriting the Bible because that's how we make sure that it's always correct. I said, well, how can you be sure it's always correct? He says, because it's been handwritten for centuries and we are positive it's always correct. I said, that's amazing. He said, that's just amazing. So the head monk went downstairs. He said, you know, I'm sure it's correct. He said, but that man really made me wonder. So he's rereading it all. And he's upstairs and he's terribly distraught. So another one of the monks says, so what's the problem? He goes, for all of these years, there's always been a mistake. He says, what's the mistake? He said, the word is celebrate. So I didn't, that's not Catholic.
Yeah.
When you had said sternum, that's what reminded me.
When I read that, there are very few jokes that really make me laugh out loud when I'm by myself. You know, to read them to somebody else who's with me, a lot of jokes make me laugh. But when I read that joke about the sternum, I was laughing out loud. And
Oh, did I laugh when you said
I
it?
was trying to read it to people over the phone when I first got it. And I never made it through the whole joke without laughing because it's just knowing what's coming. It's a very funny joke.
And you can picture the men all squirming.
Oh, God, definitely, without a doubt.
Okay, so ladies, if we have nothing else, any of you that are not on mute, please do a nice big thank you to Joyce. And if you're on mute, just put your hands up so we can see it. All right, so
Thank you, Joyce.
I look forward to seeing
we
you.
look forward to the next time we see you, and just happy for you. Thank you again. We really
And stay well.
Thank
stay
you.
well. And
Stay well,
ladies, looking
everybody.
forward to you next month. Don't miss it. We're going to have a wonderful program. It was wonderful seeing you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take care, everyone. Joyce, again, thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Bye now.